Well, good morning. It's been a while since I've been up here. It's been a busy time. And the subject that I have is one that 10 years ago I never thought would exist as a problem today. But we are faced with the tragedy of transgenderism. And I want to try to help you understand what's going on and why this is happening, and give you a greater scheme of all the different things that are coming together against us, against the gospel. And we need to be ready. We need to be able to stand firm, and because there's a lot going on. But these are days of opportunities too. We need to remember that. Many, many people are hurting. People who are involved in transgenderism are hurting. And we need to catch them before they do things to their bodies that are irreversible. So, the tragedy of transgenderism. I want to start off with God's plan from the very beginning, because this is where we stand and what we believe. So, back to Genesis 1:27, it says this: "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." The only two genders. And you look at the Hebrew down there, about midway, it says Elohim bara atam, zakar, male, and unakaba, female. He created them. Only two. Only two. So we've got to keep that at the forefront. But why is there so much confusion in our world today? A man wants to be a woman. A woman cannot say what a woman is. And people who are in charge of our welfare in this country think that money just grows on trees. Well, it can be printed. So as long as we can print money, we won't run out of money, right? Well, there are problems with that, as we understand with our own pocketbook. Well, what is a woman? Taking that question, this has come up, and it shows you what difficulties we have. Well, according to the LGBT Foundation, they believe a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. Well, this is circular reasoning, as we know. Therefore, trans women are women. Stand to Reason, a Christian organization, says this, though: female is a reference to biology. A person who has XX chromosomes and reproductive organs that make bearing children possible is a woman. In other words, an adult human female. And I was at a conference on apologetics 2 weeks ago. Jay Richards of the Heritage Foundation was speaking on these things, and he brought it down to a very easy way of showing the two differences. If a person has ovaries and gives birth to other humans, that's a woman. A man has sperm. It's very easy to discern that. And there are only two forms. No matter if you have XXX chromosomes or XXY chromosomes, you're going to have one of those, either ovaries or sperm. Okay, so this was interesting. This was a meme that was put out at a conference. Repeat after us: trans women are women. I love what J.K. Rowling wrote back. No. And she has been an advocate against all this, and I appreciate her for that. So we need more people who are out there and are known to say something. In fact, we all need to say something. Christians need to raise their voices. But there is cognitive dissonance, isn't there? A transgender and a Christian apologist in conversation. Here's a little scenario that shows you the cognitive dissonance. The Christian apologist says, well, love does not require approval. In other words, he's saying loving people means seeking what is best for them, and that means standing in the way of behaviors that will hurt them or others. So love is sometimes tough. Tough love is needed. But the trans person replies, no, love requires approval. Why? Because they want to have our approval of what they're doing. That makes them feel good. So they want our approval, and they say, well, if you love us, then you'll approve of us, right? So the apologist returns this: do you love me? Puts them on the spot, right? Well, the trans person said, well, yes, I love you. And the apologist says, well, do you approve of my position then? And what does the trans say? No! Cognitive dissonance, hypocrisy at the base. And that's what we're facing. Remember when we talked about the Great Reset? Why is there so much confusion? Well, there's a big, powerful group of people behind that. They want us to reflect, reimagine, and they want to reset the world. We need to realize that a lot of what's going on is this great reset. There are powerful people with a lot of money and a bent will. And remember, we are in a difficult world. So they have a plan to reset the world. So there's the LGBT thrust. And you let something like that in the door, and you think back then, oh, well, they can go ahead and do their thing, they won't bother us. No, then it goes on and on and on. They want more and more and more. They want the world. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, we talked about that, and it's disrupting the school system in America around the whole country. Racism has been brought up as a factor to try to justify what they're doing. And then there's transgenderism. Notice what I have in the middle of that. Because all of these go back to Marxism. And Marxism is a cruel policy. Marx himself was a strange person, a very ungenerate person, and yet we have from him and his colleagues a system that never worked, and they want to apply it again and again and again. Well, then there's the pandemic, which I believe was very much orchestrated or used, certainly used by the forces that are against us. And terrorism is being used. A lot of these organizations want the Islamic terrorism to thrive because it's so disruptive of countries. And we see that now with the war in Israel. It's very disruptive, and it's pulling everything in. And we know the real culprits behind it, and they want to destroy the world as it is now, especially the Christian world, especially democracy. And we're at the heart of that. And then there is the sex and drugs that are being exploited to the max. And it is destroying our culture, destroying our young people, destroying the morality, and pulling them away from Christianity. And we need to get them back. We need to fight hard, because it is a battle. What do they want? They want control. The elite wants to control the masses. They want to take away the middle class, because the middle class is inhibiting them from having that control. So bring us down to a pauper class so that they can control. But you know, there's a greater threat, isn't there? For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist. We need truth. With the breastplate of righteousness in place. Are Christians righteous? Are they examples? And with your feet fitted with the gospel of peace. With the readiness of the gospel of peace. Gospel of peace. Do we have peace in this world? No. We have peace in our hearts because we know the God of peace. Okay? And then you have the take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. The shield of faith. Do we have strong faith? Take the helmet of salvation. Salvation. We need to preach that. We need to reach out. We need to save people around us. So the helmet of salvation. Take up the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. That's our only offensive weapon. All the rest is defensive. But we go with the word of truth, and we have the gospel. So that's what we need to do. That's what needs to be injected into this world that is falling apart. So we need to go out. So what's really happening? Well, stirring up Hamas against Israel is part of their plan. The ultimate plan to bring in more groups against Israel so that Iran can initiate the end times, Armageddon. The head of Iran, Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei, is a 12er. He believes that he's already seen the Mahdi coming back, their Messiah coming back, and speaking to him and urging him to bring about the Armageddon, the end time, where Islam will become victorious over the whole world. So he is totally in it, and Iran is focused, or the government of Iran is. The people surely aren't. They're overrun. Transgenderism is here to blur the lines between sexes so that the image of God is erased. They want to destroy sexual boundaries because it destroys the whole sense of morality. Homosexuality, destroy biblical view of marriage, and they've done a great job of that. Great, destructive job. The push for Marxism, so that they can destroy the middle class and force dependence on government. And that's what they've done greatly from the pandemic all the way through, forcing people to be more dependent on the government. And we are running up that bill, 33 trillion plus. Leniency for crime. Why? It destroys freedom and it pushes for a police state. So people will come and finally say, do something. Okay, take away the guns, take away your freedoms, and we'll control it. We'll get rid of the criminals. Haven't you seen that coming? The liberalism in the police state is there, the leniency, so that they can bring about their ends. Read The Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis and you will understand. Leniency for prostitution. Well, it destroys the biblical view of marriage. And I thought, if people didn't use drugs, if they didn't go after illicit sex and prostitution, there wouldn't be any prostitution, there wouldn't be any drugs. But it's greed and avarice and everything else. Okay, definition on transgenderism. This is from Oxford, I believe, Oxford Dictionary. Possession of a gender identity that is not congruent with the sex assigned at birth, often associated with but not necessarily resulting in gender dysphoria. Now, gender dysphoria has been basically classified as a mental issue, but it's gone beyond that. Well, Kevin Johnson gave me this book to look at because it had some good statistics, and the writer Abigail Schreier did a lot of research for this. She was highlighted with one of the Hillsdale Imprimis articles, and it mentioned a number of these things. I'm just going to use her for some statistics mostly. I don't agree with her whole position because she's kind of okay with adult transgenders making their decision, but she's really down on those who are younger. And that's where her volley is positioned against. Just over a decade ago, transgenderism was not on the radar. We know that. Between 2016 and 2017, the number of gender surgeries for females in the U.S. quadrupled, accounting for 70% of all gender surgeries, far outstripping those for men. And it was just earlier, it was just boys who thought that they were girls, but there was a big shift, and you wonder why in the last 10 years. In 2018, the UK reported a 4,400% rise over the previous decade in teenage girls seeking gender treatments. That's a very large rise. And then this is from Williams Institute. They said approximately 1.4 million transgender and non-binary adults are in America. and 150,000 transgender and non-binary adolescents and young adults live in the United States. I guess the 1.4 million is around the world, and 150,000 adolescents live in the United States. Because it is a United States and a Great Britain, the free world. You don't see this in countries that are Islamic. Interesting. What was the greatest influence on those who decided to switch their gender? Social media, by far. And they did surveys of schools. They were taken aback when they found that 15, 25, 30 girls in a class, like sophomores, all at the same time decided that they were transgender. Why? Because their friends were saying that they were transgender. They didn't really know what it was, but it was something that brought them accolades and some recognition. Social media. We need to do something about that. What is the role of the influences? Because that's what you find on social media. And you've heard this. They often will say, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? That's a pretty heavy question to bring to a parent who's struggling with this. If you think you might be trans, you are. So here are some, I think, 7 different lines or directions that they follow. They'll say, if you think you might be trans, you are. You're thinking about it, so you must be. Number 2, trying out trans? Well, binders are a great way to start for females. Just jump in. Try it, 3, testosterone or T is amazing. It may just solve all your problems. Take it and you'll feel a lot better. It destroys a lot of things. Number 4, if your parents loved you, this is big. If your parents loved you, they would support your trans identity, wouldn't they? Well, think back to that discussion between the apologist and the trans person. If you're not supported in your trans identity, you will probably kill yourself. And now suicide has risen among young people. They are in dire straits, but social media has given them many reasons to doubt who they are. 6, deceiving parents and doctors is justified, they say. These influencers will push this if it helps transition. So don't tell your parents, just do it. You'll feel better. And 7, you don't have to identify as the opposite sex to be trans. You can be non-binary. You can be whatever you want. You can choose your gender. Well, that's from their side. The Pew report, research report, is often interesting. This is what they did on transgenderism. And they said young adults 18 to 29 are the most likely to be transgender or non-binary. In fact, they say about 5% of young adults younger than 30 in the U.S. say their gender is different from their sex assigned at birth. 5%. Now, 2% would say that they're trans, and 3% would say that they're non-binary. Because there are a lot of girls who don't want to be boys, but they don't like being girls anymore. And we find out that it's because when they're on social media and they look at all these other girls and how beautiful they are and everything like that, they don't feel like they can match. And they're going through puberty. I mean, all of us can remember that it was an awkward stage. I think all of us. I know I did. Well, why is this movement happening? Here's a Christian perspective. And this is a book that I recommend that you get, by Frank Turek. He's an award-winning author, an apologist, and a conference speaker, and he's a friend of mine. And I appreciate his insightful way of being able to use reason and answer the tough questions. Now, this book is basically, he first wrote it just dealing with same-sex marriage. And in the back, he has a whole list of 25 answers to the major questions that people will bring up about this or put on you. And he's got excellent answers on that. But he added the part on transgenderism, and I'm going to use a lot of his material because he has a good Christian perspective. He said this: people argue over why this movement is happening. Some claim this effort to destroy sexual boundaries in the nuclear family as part of a larger leftist agenda to destroy Western civilization. Why this movement is happening is controversial. That it's happening is undeniable. So that's where we'll start. So what about the rise of transgenderism? This is what he says. Quote, "Gender dysphoria has been a rare condition historically. Until recently, it affected only about 1 out of every 10,000 people, most of them biological boys thinking they were girls. In fact, prior to 2012, 11 years ago, there is no scientific literature showing that gender dysphoria even affected teenage girls. It was not on the radar. 11 years. iPhone 17. Again, the primary cause among girls is an increase in their social media use, especially when they have friends who identify as trans." So take that phone away. Often the desire to change is not really to become a boy, but rather because they no longer want to be a girl, they do not feel comfortable in their bodies. And again, it's usually going through puberty or having other problems. And a majority of these girls who do go through the transgender phases already have mental problems, mental difficulties, or bad home life and traumatic experiences from the past. So they already are damaged in many ways. And he goes on and he deals with this question: why following your heart, come on, late typing, why following your heart is not a reliable guide?
Well, that applies too.
Yes. Well, number one, our hearts are selfish. We know that. And people make many mistakes for the wrong reasons. They're selfish. Number two, our hearts are deceptive. We will let our emotions lead us into areas where we do not belong. Number three, our hearts are conflicted. We often want two opposite things, so we've got to make that choice. And without good counsel, we make a lot of mistakes. And that's where you all can be very helpful to the younger people as they come and ask you for counsel. The Foundry, for example, as you disciple others. Number four says our hearts change. Young people go through phases. It is a travesty to push GAS, gender-affirming surgery, on a young person who is going through the traumas of puberty and adolescence. That is so true. So following your heart is not reliable. In fact, growing up, you encounter a lot of problems. Most young people who claim to be trans also have changes of heart. About 80%, and this is the average, look down below, it's between 61% to 98%, and Frank Turek is using the mean of 80%. About 80% of young teens who experience gender dysphoria grow out of it by the time they are 18. They grow out of it. I mean, that's just been from time immemorial. They've had this sense of imbalance when they go through puberty. Well, hormones are affecting them in strange ways. And maturity does that. It brings you out. So that's why there should not be this push. The Medical Association has done us a very grave error, travesty. So why would anyone block nature's remedy to a problem and castrate or sterilize a child for a feeling that is likely to soon change on its own? So the best advice you can give your friends who are having to deal with this with their children is let them grow up. Perhaps even 98% of the people grow out of it. One of the puberty blockers now given to children is Lupron, which was once used to chemically castrate sex offenders. It stops the testosterone. And they do this with young people. Instead of following your heart, Frank Turek says, guard your heart. So, Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Proverbs 14:12, There is a way that seems right to a person, but in the end it leads to death. Yes, right? So guard your heart. Help others guard their heart. There are 5 flaws in transgender ideology, he says. First, the design of the body proves there are only 2 genders. The design shows that. What does he mean? Humans can either produce sperm or eggs. That is a great comeback for those who say, well, you can be all these different identities. No, we're either male or female. We either produce sperm or we produce eggs. That's it. Biology is science. In that way, I do accept that science of biology. So start with that. Number 2, and I had this, transgenderism must presuppose fixed genders. Presuppose. What do I mean by that? They must know what a man or woman is in order to recognize the problem. I'm a girl or I'm a woman, I want to be a man. Well, what else are you going to be? An elephant? No, there are only 2 genders. And that presupposes, it's presupposed in your choice. He also says gender dysphoria could not exist without 2 known fixed genders. This is the irony of fixed genders. This is interesting. There's trouble in the LGBTQ community. Why? If the T's, transgenders, get their way, then the L's, G's, and B's don't exist because there are no genders. And they say, well, we're females, we're men, or we're binaries, or bisexual. Well, you can't do that if you don't have any fixed genders. So that wipes them out. They don't exist. In addition, if there are no fixed genders, then there are no women, and therefore no women's rights. Boom. That's what, this whole Title IX thing is about. In regard to the question, what is a woman? If the answer is a biological female, then transgender ideology itself is false. So it's all hypocrisy. It's all shadows and, shifting around the peas under the cups. So he goes on. Number 3, you can change your mind but not your biology. If our psychology and biology are mixed up, why do we try to fix our biology instead of our mind? Because gender dysphoria is a mental condition. So they need to talk to the psychologist first, and a Christian psychologist, not these others. They just push them in even more. So he has a note there. The real difference between men and women, get this, researchers find 6,500 genes that differ between the sexes. We are different in many, many ways. Hallelujah, I say. 4, sex is not assigned at birth. Assigned, note that word is often used. What does he mean? Problem with changing definitions. And this often happens with this world that we're in. Transgender advocates believe that gender is arbitrary and can be chosen. The sex of a child is not assigned at birth, but it is discovered at birth. So remember that. It's not assigned. It's discovered. Oh, we have a male. We have a boy. We have a girl. They don't say we have something else, do we? Do they? There's no basis for transgender rights. No basis. Why? Rights can only come from God. And we have no evidence that God wants anyone to harm themselves in a way that denies the creation order. God created them male and female. Now, he also says the left wants to change reality to fit their thoughts, whereas the right wants to change their thoughts to fit reality. Big difference. The health hazards of transitioning, what the media does not tell you. I read a number of different articles and medical reports. Even the Journal of American Medical Association was saying, oh, there aren't any real problems. Maybe 1% of those that want to go back. They're totally wrong. It is so frustrating to get all of these academic papers and scientists to lie, to go against what they really know. Anyway, Turek says this: at the societal level, we cannot procreate or nurture the next generation by sterilizing people or pumping them with cross-sex hormones. Pretending that men and women can transition and that men can have babies does not make it so. Facts don't care about your feelings, and facts don't yield to your feelings either. He goes on. On the individual level, cross-sex hormones and sex reassignment surgeries create health problems that include loss of bone density, increase in heart attacks, breast cancer, diabetes and stroke, and loss of fertility. In fact, a study published by Duke University Press found that trans people die at a rate twice that of non-trans people over any given period. You have to watch the research that you read. It is so devastatingly problematic. Suicide and gender dysphoria. You have that question again. Would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? They push this on the parents. Could it be that mental health is a bigger factor driving trans suicide than social disapproval? Dr. Lisa Littman's research study, and she went through a lot. She did an extended research on those. Found that 63% of young people had pre-existing mental conditions before announcing they were transgender. Moreover, almost half had self-harmed, and 50% had suffered a traumatic event in their lives, such as their parents divorcing, being bullied, or suffering sexual abuse. Those factors are already known influences in suicide rates, regardless of any trans stigma. We've got to dig deeper and bring these things to bear upon what's going on. Turek wrote this. A former transgender person said this, quote, 100% of the people have been able to pinpoint, the ones that he's known. He came out of the transgender, and he's talking about those that he knew. 100% of the people have been able to pinpoint exactly what happened to trigger the urge to escape into an alternate gender identity. Their childhood events run the gamut of abuse, abandonment, and neglect. Something always happened. So Turek says this: the bottom line is that mental health issues, often produced by childhood trauma, appear to be at the root of dissatisfaction with one's biological sex. So we need to realize that as we try to help transgender directed young people or old people. Transitioning makes matters worse. Well, follow the money. Surgeons and big pharma love the treatment protocols that often do not work. Painful surgeries and a lifetime of cross-sex hormones brings them a lot of money because the insurance companies feel like they have to pay for it. And as long as they pay for it, the doctors get paid. The bottom line is, on average, transitioning does not prevent suicide or solve mental health problems. In fact, the severely elevated suicide rate is worse after surgery. The real solution is to provide mental health care, not surgery or cross-sex hormones. And then finally, the government is coming for your children. So the Biden administration put out this policy statement. Quote, there is no scientifically sound research showing negative impacts from providing gender-affirming care. Lie, lie, lie. I wanted to put that in there. Lie, just coming big. The decision for the child welfare system to become involved in the lives of families, potentially to the extent of removing children from their families and homes, if the family, from the age of 3, should be wielded with the utmost care, grounded in evidence, and always prioritizing the well-being of children and preservation of families. Ha! Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, we know where that goes. Rod Dreher, remember we read his book, Live Not by Lies. And we've got a lot of lies going out there, don't we? He says this, that statement that I just read you ought to send a chill down everyone's spine. The Biden administration is laying the policy groundwork for the seizing of minor children from parents for the sake of jacking those children up with hormones and mutilating their bodies with surgery. That is wrong. And we need to speak out about it. And we need to know how to speak out about it, right? So, my question finally, what will you do now that you know.